Hello everyone and welcome to this video presentation. In this presentation we will see how we can create a virtual machine using VirtualBox. So first thing we need to go on the internet and go download the VirtualBox software. So we type in VirtualBox, download. So here you will see that we have the download site for virtualbox.org. This is the one that we need. So we click on download VirtualBox Manager. Depending on your host operating system, you download the version that corresponds to your operating system. In our case, we are using Windows hosts. So you click on the Windows hosts. So it will start downloading the application. Once it's downloaded, you double click on it to install it. I will not go through that process because it's already installed on my host computer. But you follow the steps. You just double click on that and you follow the installation procedure until the end. Once installed, you will have an icon on your desktop called Oracle VirtualBox. So let me just open it on my host here. So when you open it, this is the icon that you will see on your desktop, and it will look something like that. So if we need to create a virtual machine, we just need to click on the new here. So once we click on the new, we have to define the computer name for the virtual machine. So let's say for this example, I will put, let's say, PC1. So I will put the name PC1. By default, it will go to a specific folder where it's going to save the virtual machines. In my case here, I changed that setting. So first off, if you don't have enough space, let's say on your C drive, and you have a second drive that you want to use for your virtual machines, okay, let's say you have multiple drives and your C drive maybe is full and you don't want to install the virtual machines on the C drive because you don't have enough space, you can use a different drive. Okay. To change the location, because by default the location is under the user's profile and there is a folder called VirtualBox. But to change that, you go to here to File, Preferences, and this you can set here the default path where you want all your virtual machines to be created. If you don't do that, they will be created automatically in the default folder, which is on the C drive. So you can predefine that before you create the virtual machines. So in my case, I created on my C drive a folder I called VMs, and under that folder, I install my virtual machines. So all my virtual machines, I know that they are under this folder here. But in your case, you can opt maybe to have it on a different hard disk, maybe on a different partition on the D drive or on another drive, or on the C drive, but in a different location. Okay. So once you set that under File, Preferences, and here in the default machine folder, you change it here, then every new machine that you will create will automatically go there. So like in my case here, I set it to go on this CVMs. I have right now some virtual machines here. So if I try to create a new virtual machine now, if I click on new, I will have to provide with the name of the virtual machine. Let's say I will call it PC1. You will see that the machine folder is this path here, which is the C:\VMS. Okay. If I did not set it in the default location, I can change it manually here now. So while I'm creating the virtual machine, I can decide maybe that this virtual machine I want to put it somewhere else. So I will just click here and go other, browse to the location that I want to save the virtual machine, and that's it. Then we have the type. The type, it depends if you are installing a Microsoft Windows operating system, a Linux, Solaris, IBM OS2, Mac OS, or other operating systems. In our case, we are going to be using Microsoft Windows for this competency. So we use Microsoft Windows. Then in the version here, you have to select the right operating system. So you have all the different operating systems that are from Microsoft. So if you are installing Windows 7 32-bit, you have to select Windows 7 32-bit. If you are installing Windows 7 64-bit, you have to use Windows 7 64-bit. If you are using Windows 10, Windows 11, always you have to select if it's 32 or 64-bit. And this is very important to select the right operating system here. Then you go next. On this screen, you have to allocate the memory that you want this virtual machine to have. Like any regular computer, you have specific amount of RAM on the machine. So for each machine, you will be asked to, when you configure a virtual machine, it will tell you that you need to have, let's say, 2 GB of RAM or 1 GB of RAM or 4 GB of RAM. So you have to use this slider here to use the amount of RAM that is required on that specific virtual machine. So you can use the slider, or you can click on the up or down arrows here, or you can manually write the amount here. Once I select the right amount of memory, I will click on next. Now I need to configure a hard disk. So in a virtual machine, it's like a computer, like a physical computer, but this is virtual. But I need to specify the RAM, the memory. I need to specify the hard disk space that I want. So here I need to create a virtual hard disk now, which is the default option in this case. So I'll click on create. Now I have three different options. These are three different formats from different manufacturers. So VDI is the default for VirtualBox, VHD is the default for Microsoft, and so on. So we will be using VDI unless otherwise specified. So VDI is the default for VirtualBox, Oracle VirtualBox, so we'll be using VDI. We click on next. On this screen here, you have to define what type of hard disk we are going to use. Because I have two options, either to create a hard disk that the size of the hard disk on my host computer will be dynamic, meaning it will start very small and it can grow up to the size that I will define during the configuration, or I can decide to have it a fixed size. So if I want, let's say, a hard disk of 30 GB, if I select fixed size, automatically here on the computer, it will take 30 GB out of my storage space on my host computer. So fixed size is good when we are working in a production environment. In our labs, we will never use fixed size. So never use fixed size, always use dynamically allocated. This way you don't use the storage on your host computer without need. So it will grow up to the size that you will define here. So I will click on next. And then here, this is the path where it's going to save my hard disk. So this is the hard disk name that it will create, which is the name of my computer that I defined, which is PC1.vdi. And it will put it in a PC1 folder under the VMS folder under the C drive. So automatically here you see it created my PC1 folder. And now when I define the file size here for the hard disk, it will create a hard disk here with that size. But as a matter of fact, since I chose here to be dynamically allocated, the file size that you will see here will be very tiny. If I select fixed disk, right away the file that will be created here will be 32 GB, which I don't want to use 32 GB right away. But when I select dynamically allocated and I select, let's say, 32 GB, it will create a file here that can grow up to 32 GB. But it will start, I think, about 2 or 4 megabytes. And it can go up to 32 gigabytes. So I will click create. So you will see it will create the file right away here. So it creates a couple of files. One of them is my hard disk. And as you see here, it's 2 megabytes. So it created the hard disk of 2 megabytes, but this hard disk file can grow up to 32 gigabytes. Okay, once I clicked on that, now the machine is created. So this is kind of the hardware or the virtual machine. There are some settings that I need to configure also after I create the machine. So first of all, I select the machine here and I click on settings, and I will go over different options. So on the general section here, I have several tabs. The basic one, this is where I can change the computer name. So right now, this computer name, as you see, is PC1. So if I want it to be PC2 or whatever name, I can change it here. If I need to change the type of the operating system, I can change it here. If I need to change the version, I can change it here. On the Advanced tab, this is where it's going to save the snapshots, which kind of a backup of this virtual machine. On the description and disk encryption and description, we don't really need to change anything here. If I go to the system option here on the left side, so on the motherboard tab, I see this is amount of RAM that I can use. Here, I have a floppy disk, an optical drive, and the hard disk. Of course, nobody's using floppy disks anymore, so I can uncheck that. I can even select it and move it down, because this is the boot order. So the computer, this virtual machine, when it will start by going to the optical drive, which is the CD or DVD, try to see if there is a bootable media there. If it does not find a bootable media, it will go to the hard disk. If it finds a bootable media, it will boot from that bootable media. So here, it depends on the operating system. We can change the memory size that we will be using, depending also on how much memory we have on our computer. As you see here, the green section is the amount of RAM that I can use, maximum amount of RAM that I can use. Okay, so the total amount of RAM on this computer, on my host computer, is 16 GB. But this is the section that my operating system is using on my host. And this is the section that I can allocate for virtual machines. Of course, we are not going to use all that. So we only need, let's say, for Windows 7, a 2 gigabyte RAM. Under the processor tab, also here, this machine has 8 core CPUs. So some of them are used by my host computer. I can maybe use 2 or 3 or 4. But again, in our cases, we are going to most of the time use one CPU. But this is where we can change it. If I go to the display, this is where I will assign some graphic memory for my video card. It is recommended to use the maximum, which is 128 megabytes, to have a full screen virtual machines. Otherwise, I will not be able to make a full screen virtual machine. Here also, how many memories do you have on your host computer and how many you can use for the virtual machine. We are not going to use that option. Under the storage section here, I have my SATA controller, on which I have 2 devices. One is the hard disk, one is the optical drive. So my hard disk is the one that I created, which is the virtual size is 32 GB, but the actual size is 2 megabytes right now. Whenever I put any data on this hard disk, this actual size will grow, and it can grow up to 32 GB. So it's not eating up space on my host computer from the beginning. It will use the space as needed. The second one here is my CD or DVD optical drive. This is where I can insert CDs or DVDs to install operating systems or applications or games or listen to music or whatever. It's like the CD or DVD on your computer. If I need to put a CD or DVD here, I have to select it here. And on the right side here, I click on that and I browse. I choose a disk file from my host computer. And all these are ISO files that I have already on my host computer, which are different operating systems. So let's say for Windows 7, I will select this Windows 7 ISO file and I will click on open. So automatically it will insert my DVD of Windows 7 64-bit into my optical drive of the virtual machine, because this is what I need to install Windows on that virtual machine. Then when I go to audio, by default, audio is enabled. If you don't need audio on the virtual machine, you can just uncheck that. Then the next section is the network. So in the network here, I can have up to 4 network adapters on a virtual machine. Most of the time, you are going to only use one, unless for different competencies, network competencies, we might have more than one network adapter. But in a client operating system like Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 10, Windows 11, we are using only one network adapter. So you will see that the other ones, the checkbox is not checked in. Okay, it's only the first one that's checked in. Then we have different options here for the attach to. We will be using two options only. NAT, if I want this virtual machine to be connected to the internet, I have to select NAT. If I want this virtual machine not to be connected to the internet, but only to be connected to other virtual machines, I will use host only adapter. So these are the two options that we will be using in this competency. NAT or host only adapter. NAT, it will connect to the internet. Host only adapter, it does not connect to the internet. If I want to unplug the network cable, I can just click on the advanced here and I can uncheck that. Unchecking that checkbox is exactly as if I unplug the network cable from the back of the computer. So I can plug it anytime, I can unplug it. So by default, it is plugged in. Then for the serial port, we are not going to use serial ports. They are legacy technology. They are not used anymore. So we are not going to use serial ports. For USB, we will leave that. We will not change anything in here. Then we have the shared folders. If I need to share a folder on my host computer to be accessible from the virtual machine, this is where I will use the option. Okay, so I will not do that for now. We'll do it later on. So I will click OK. So my machine is here. And now if I need to start this virtual machine, either I double click on it, or I can select it and click on start, or I right click on it and click on start. Okay, so different options to start the virtual machine. So I will click on the start. So this is a computer that will start. It's a virtual computer that's inside my host computer. As you see here, it's starting, and it found the optical drive. It had the Windows 7 installation media, so it started the installation of Windows 7. So that concludes this presentation for how to use VirtualBox to create virtual machines.